Welcome back, everyone, to the Integration Hub for episode 2. In today's episode, we actually have a couple of partners, 2 leaders from iPass with us today, iPass.com. That's Chief Partnership Officer Robert Rand and Director of Partnerships Dave Malda. Now, together we'll explore why disconnected systems and especially siloed data creates so much pain for businesses, from costly errors to missed opportunities, and of course, the worst, frustrated customers. And more importantly, we'll talk about how modern technologies and their strategies can turn those challenges into actual competitive advantages. Hope you enjoy the interview now. All right, everyone. And for our second episode, I'm very excited to dive into a nice partnership that we have with iPass.com. And with us today, we have 2 wonderful individuals, not only their Chief Partnership Officer, but their Director of Partnerships as well. Both Dave and Robert are here. But let's do some quick introductions. Let's start with you, Robert, as the Chief Partnership Officer in particular. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about iPass.
So I'm Robert. I've been heading up partnerships at iPass.com for the better part of 2.5 years. Been working in the commerce space for the better part of 20 years and dealing with all facets of design, development, digital marketing, and all the operational needs behind the scenes. iPass.com, iPass stands for Integration Platform as a Service. And so we are a platform that's built to bring predictability and to bring a great experience forward for merchants and businesses that need to have their data flowing. They need to break down the silos and be able to use better, more modern technology side by side with their existing tech stack. And so we have a hub and spoke approach that allows users to come in and turn on integrations from our marketplace, like to Orderful, and get data flowing with any number of other systems, ERP, e-commerce, and so on down the line. Lots of different software and solutions so that sales, operations, fulfillment, all of your accounting, and everybody in the team marketing, everybody's got access to the data that they need in the systems they're using.
Love that. And for you, Dave, tell us about your role as the Director of Partnerships and why it's important for the company to be close-knit with Wonderful as well.
Yeah, no, great question. So, on the partner side, I think for Robert and I, just the importance of, tech partnerships. These are agencies that we work with. These are folks like Orderful, right? That we partner with. We have found that in that ecosystem, we can bring a ton of value to these partnerships where merchants, different companies are having integration challenges, right? And these conversations come up and they need to be solved. And that's where Robert and I sort of plug in and help. So
I love this. And I think, this is going to touch a lot of the pain points that we hear from customers when it comes to, I think modernizing their tech stack, right? And realizing, whoa. If we can't, eliminate some of these silos and get all of our data flowing through a really clean passageway, right? Then there's not much more we can do to improve our systems overall. So I want to talk about the disconnect that we see among tools and all these blind spots that go into this as well. Let's start with you, Dave. What do you think are some of the biggest risks for companies that don't centralize their visibility with their integrations to begin with?
Yeah, I think what I've seen many times is companies will maybe connect their systems internally together using APIs. They'll have maybe a developer or a programmer or someone internally put these things together very quickly, and you will see the value relatively quickly, right? As far as data moving back and forth. But to scale with that and to be able to properly pinpoint where errors or challenges might be occurring in the operation or in the business, that is where there's a lot of difficulty, right? And so this is where we can help with that. And I would say that's probably one spot where people they underestimate how important it is to like start with that foundation on a solid like kind of level, right? They just kind of, oh, we need to connect this to this. Okay, great. Let's just go do that really quickly, right? And it feels satisfying, because you do see that value very quickly. But over time, I heard someone call it a Franken tech stack or something. I was like, that is brilliant, because that's exactly what it turns into. It turns into this like Frankenstein of tech that is just really difficult to undo. So
Well, I think that's interesting. The outcomes, right? It seems sometimes like, especially for us in the EDI realm of this all, it's kind of that aftermath. But how does that overall impact operations, right? What are some of the situations that you've heard from customers when they have this Frankenstein-esque technology stack put together without that guidance? I'm sure that you're giving customers. How does that impact their operations for their customers and the outcome that they have as a company as well?
So I'll jump in there and say that it has more than one impact, as you could imagine. And so first, the cost of upkeep and maintenance, that technical debt that you've taken on, it stacks up. And so, okay, well, you wrote this thing and there's no documentation on it, and APIs in your software changing and things are just breaking. You don't really, have that proactive nature to it, and you're putting out a lot of fires. Data doesn't flow successfully. Customers are calling, "Where's my stuff?" Or, that those sorts of communications are happening, and you're dealing with everything very, very reactively. At the same time, for the customer experience, when your data isn't unified and things aren't happening the way that the shopper would expect, right? Then your inventory isn't up to date in a sales channel. You're selling something you don't have, or you're not selling it even though you do have it, because you have to reserve too much because you know that it's not up to date. You are getting orders and they're not getting where they need to go for fulfillment fast enough because you're batching out once a night instead of dealing with it in real time, and so on and so on. That, you wind up, depending on the industry, whether it's B2B or B2C, whether it's, you wind up with different challenges, and depending on the scale of the business, you wind up with different challenges. But at the end of the day, when you want to be delighting customers, you're losing a lot of opportunity, and you're killing a lot of productivity chasing your tail with it.
Definitely. Do either of you have maybe an example from customers that you've talked to where, you can even put a cost on it, where you've seen this actually cost businesses, whether it's a more of like the opportunity cost, which I think we see a lot with like retailers, right? It's like, yes, Walmart wants to work with us today, but we can't get set up right now. Or even if it's like actual chargebacks. Have you ever seen that in your work?
Yes. I mean, Dave, I don't know if you have any favorites, but I can run some numbers with you.
I mean, there's just one, Grace, that comes to mind, and this is maybe going back 5 or 6 years, so it's slightly dated for sure. But I recall, a couple of years ago, we put a calculator together, and we took a bunch of like industry reports, and it was really focused on the cost of an error in your, say, in someone keying this in incorrectly, so wrong address, wrong name, wrong amount. And it ended up being it was like $81 or $82 was sort of the amount per order that was factored in when people miskeyed something, and this was across, this was an average, right? But yeah, it ended up being, so it's probably a lot more now because this is slightly dated, but it was like $81, $82 was kind of where that was the number we found based on some research, that when things were not done correctly, this is what it cost a business on every order, right? So it was not insignificant if you're doing high volume. So, but yeah, Robert, I'll let you chime in
Yeah,
too.
and I think it does depend on the scale. So recently, I was pulled in with a partner, with a merchant who's implementation with us, and we're going down the list of things with them, and we're figuring out, okay, we're going to get all their orders from all their sales channels into their ERP. Great. And, so that was understood that we dropped them off there, but we're trying to get into the logic of what happens next. Um, is it something where we can automatically predetermine which warehouse this is going to be filled from, or what status it's going to go into depending on certain circumstances, et cetera? We want to automate further. We figured out that that information wasn't available because everything's been done manually until this point, and they haven't really set standards for any of this. And we started to reverse engineer with them. Now I can't tell you, employees in different places have different salaries, but they had a full-time person dedicated to this. So to getting the orders and basically, figuring out where to send them and how to route them and what to do with them. And so when you start to think about it at scale like that, of different operations of either these things happening or not happening, and we see it in other places where, for instance, a fun one on the retail side that I like, we had a merchant that did most of their business in store and did a little bit online and was using a major email marketing and SMS marketing platform. And so, this is something else that we solve for multiple users, of course. But they were getting all of the e-commerce orders into the marketing platform and none of the in-store orders. So now they're sending messages to shoppers based on what they bought online, but ignoring all the in-store activity. And so they're saying, hey, we haven't seen you for a while. They just made a purchase yesterday. And so when you think about now knowing all of those in-store purchasers, what their habits are, what to recommend for them, when to send them the right offer to replenish something or whatever it may be, that you can think about, depending on the size of the business, the scale of the benefit of that can be tremendous. And this is kind of where, we think about unifying data, things like gift cards between in-store and online, or loyalty points, and allowing merchants of all sizes to compete with the behemoths, to compete with the experience that a company like Target can provide, and doing it at, very much in a similar way that Orderful handles things, coming in with flat fees, flat monthly or other ongoing rates, being able to provide a more predictable, standardized approach that can be delivered more readily, and that one person can pick up where the last left off. It's not a bunch of quote unquote spaghetti code. It's not, completely custom, but, there's something there that everyone can run with, and it's a lot easier to maintain and a lot more cost effective to maintain.
Well, I love that you touched on that, Robert, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well, Dave, from more of the technical side of all of this, right? For maybe those out there who are leading these organizations and aren't in the technical weeds of the spaghetti codes that Robert is touching on there, what is happening internally when IT teams are trying to patch these systems together? Why does this fragmentation happen what seems so easily? And especially when looking to onboard new partners as well. You would think that you would make that as simple as possible. Why is that so difficult to do behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think just in my experience over the years, even specifically with EDI, because that was a good chunk of my past life as well, in the integration space, I found that when there wasn't maybe a champion of the project or someone leading the project, it could sometimes go off the rails fairly quickly, right? Or even maybe if the different roles and responsibilities weren't clearly outlined, then someone may think, oh, okay, well, this trading partner setup, it's important, but I'm moving on to the next project. And then the vendor maybe that's setting up the EDI, maybe there's some assumptions that they're going to do all the trading partner testing. They're just going to hook it up and it's going to work, right? And it's so much more nuanced, as you guys all know at Orderful. There's so much more to it than that, right? It's okay. Well, so we're getting an 850 from Home Depot or Cabela's, and it's got to go into NetSuite or D365 Business Central. Where does that go? And where do these segments of data, where do they need to go? Really, the champion at the business needs to know that information or have access to someone that knows that information, right? And so I have found those are just a couple of things where if it's not clearly defined upfront and the roles aren't clearly defined, i.e., maybe it's trading partner testing who's responsible for that, then I have seen projects either really take a long time and or, can maybe fail completely sometimes, right? So I don't know if that answers your
No, it does.
question. That's what comes to mind when I've seen challenges for sure.
Well, and, I think that's what's great about Oriful is we try to take on as much as that work as an organization to make sure that those situations stay, I want to say, under control, right? Because, what's great about the work that we do here is we've created these kind of really the prep work that goes before the horse in all of this, right? So that when you are looking to onboard, a lot of those guidelines are already been created, but we've already started those conversations and are working with these companies one-on-one that we know exactly what they want. And I think what a lot of people see is that back and forth, that nuance that you're talking about, Dave, in particular. People aren't, companies, EDI companies in particular, aren't focused on that problem and how to solve that problem, and almost are treating that in the EDI space as, well, that's a given and that's something we're just going to have to deal with. Where I think what's really fun about our team here is that we're taking that on as a challenge. How do we get over that hurdle that we all agree is something that, quote unquote, isn't going away? And that's what's fun, I think, using more modern AI tools in particular, and the way that we communicate with these different brands, retailers, etc., helps cut that time down so that we can make, these promises to customers that they can get onboarded quickly too. And I'm interested from both of your perspectives, and being in this side of, technology in the past as well. How do we get to a more centralized visibility? I think I touched on a little bit of what Oracle's doing, but from your perspective, when you're talking to customers, what does centralized visibility look like for them in practice? What's the outcome that you're looking to achieve for customers as well?
What's funny is I think that a lot of the time they don't know because they haven't seen it yet. So to them, it's new. They're used to having to deal with things in a decentralized world, where every team is running their own software, and if anybody tries to come near it, the the blades come out. Okay, that it's very guarded, and that's where. But for instance, the sales team needs to know when a sale has happened on the e-commerce website, or when something is paid, an invoice is paid in the ERP, that they need to know what they're communicating back with the customer. And so these are the kinds of things where, if you don't have data flowing, you have this, back to that, fiefdoms of, you're in your castle over there and I'm in mine. And it's like something out of a Monty Python film. And it gets really contentious, and there's a lot of friction. And so when we're able to show them what a system like iPass.com can do in sitting there as the hub in the middle and giving everybody that needs it visibility into the data flows and what's happening in real-time error notifications and things if data ever fails to flow successfully, and being able to show them what's possible, I find that it's a lot like, I spent a lot of time in the e-commerce space, and there was a time when people were custom building e-commerce sites, or when most of the e-commerce world was open source, which those were great days. And there's still great websites built on some of that technology. But today, you look at where the market's gone, and it's more toward the Shopify's and big commerces and what have you, the SaaS world. And I think, we're looking at the same. Not everybody wants to try to figure it out themselves, that they're looking for something more, maybe not completely turnkey. They want flexibility, but that's for me. I think the key is figuring out, how do you get these departments, these stakeholders to work together. I mean, we see some cases where with product data, you've got to get product data raw from the ERP to a product information management system like Pimcore or Kenio. Let the marketers and merchandisers clean it up before it can go to sales channels. And you get these interesting orchestrations of data where, and maybe, even though those enhanced product descriptions and categorizations and other things are coming out of the PIM, the inventory, the pricing might still come out of the ERP. That you're living in a world where different stakeholders need to be able to contribute and need to be able to work together cohesively. And that's what it's all about. It's about having your best-in-class software and getting it all to work together and in a way that is scalable and maintainable. So kind of like Orderful, where you make it very straightforward to add new trading partners. With iPass.com, we make it more straightforward to add more integrations and get data flowing with additional systems without going back to the drawing board. You're just turning on a new spoke to the hub.
Definitely. Dave, anything that you want to add to that as well?
No, I mean, Robert,
Yeah.
words right out my mouth.
Well,
No, you nailed it.
yeah,
You nailed it.
I guess the one follow-up question I have for both of you, just even outside of what we're doing for our customers and in all of our roles, from a technologist standpoint, it's interesting to see, to kind of touch on what Robert said. I always tell people what my favorite thing about the technology that we're a part of is that over time, it's democratized the experience of being a brand, really, right? Like you can get a website up and running. If let's say you're making t-shirts, you can find a way to make t-shirts, order them so quickly, right? You can, yes, get Shopify, link all these things together. And now it's like, okay, now that we have all of that democratization of being an entrepreneur, you could say, really, in this country, right? um it's kind of interesting to me to see that we're now hitting this like data wall of where that's not democratized, and like there's these silos created between systems. Where do you see that evolving over the next like 5 years, just being in the tech space yourself? I'm not a coder. I've never built anything before. I think this is where you guys shine a little bit more. Dave, I'll start with you on this. Where do you
Sure.
see that going, evolving over the next like 5 years?
I would say what's interesting is, Robert and I just came back from Big Summit, and there's sort of there's a host of shows we're going to in the next couple of months, and there's a pile that we've already gone to. And certainly AI is like on the forefront of a lot of these discussions, right? And where I think people are excited is they see that maybe you can connect two endpoints, two systems together very quickly. And although that is true, I think, in my opinion, at the moment, it seems like you may accelerate yourself to these challenges a lot quicker, right? So yes, you will connect these systems, you will see some value very quickly. However, when errors come up, when challenges come up, those smarts are maybe not going to be built into this system, right? And so I think where we're going to see this move in the next, maybe 2 years or so, 2-3 years, is having, leaning on AI as something that, for example, might help you when you're writing a business rule. So if you're creating logic, you're selling something in eaches on a website, but you receive it in cartons, right? So you get a carton of 12, but they're ones over here. Well, you need to do some business logic there to be able to map that properly, right? And so I would see AI being very useful in that scenario where you just maybe you prompt what you're looking to do, and it creates a sheet, C# or whatever the language is. It creates that, function for you, right, in code, and off you go. So you're not having to do some of those things manually. I think that's where there's some advantages right out of the gate here. And, that's maybe in the next, couple, like 1-2 years, I can see that sort of happening. But that's kind of my take on it at the moment.
Robert, anything you want to add to from your perspective?
No, I think what you're seeing is everybody's become a data company, whether they know it or not, whether they accept it or not. When they're trying to use AI, the rule of thumb is trash in, trash out. And so having good, clean data, having it flow, in near real time, having things flow naturally, whether we're talking about AI or any other system, is as crucial as ever, is more important than ever. And if you ask me, what do I think is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? Everybody's just going to be using iPass.com. But No, I mean, but in all seriousness, I think, to Dave's point, if you just have the AI write some random code, it becomes very hard to manage and maintain and to deal with what we all know the reality is that data doesn't always follow the happy path. Sometimes somebody puts a question mark in a number field. Sometimes API credentials expire. Sometimes a lot of things happen. And you need something that's a lot more maintainable. You can't have business operations falling by the wayside because of it. And so the way when people ask me about, where do we fit into that model where AI will negatively impact a lot of businesses and a lot of solutions and make them obsolete. I look at us a lot of the same way as I look at an ERP. You might now prompt in different ways, as Dave was describing, to query and ask questions and have reports generated on the fly. But the database in the ERP and your accounting suite is sacrosanct. You're getting audited. Your CFO is relying on it. It is not a bunch of quote unquote AI hallucinations or anything. That it's got to be perfect. And I would say the same of the integration layer, that getting out of that point-to-point world and trying to be reactive and get data flowing from A to B and E to G, with a bunch of one-off solutions becomes really, really hard to scale. And when you look at the other option, it's trying to get a monolith. It's trying to get one software company to solve all your problems. And it's kind of like watching an old infomercial and buying something that slices and dices and julienne's fries. It doesn't do them all well. You're lucky if it does one of them well. And so what you find is you want your best in breed, you want your best in class, you want to have it working together. And that, while I hope everybody chooses us for it, regardless of the direction they go in, that's the paradigm that we see. It's a world in which this isn't really an option. It's just about, following best practice at this point, which is, being rewritten as we speak.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on that great point and kind of the outlook right to the future, for those that are watching today and thinking to themselves, is this maybe this is a problem I have I don't even realize, or looking to at least try to figure out how to integrate so that there's not these silos. What advice would you give them, moving forward, or next steps to figure out how they could improve that for their business as well, Dave?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking of a networking event I went to like earlier in the year, and my good friend Krish over at Easy Ship said, "Dave, EDI is a 4-letter word." And I being in EDI, I was like, I've never heard this before. This is that's amazing and very true. And so I think, what I love, what y'all are doing over at Orderful is really, I think, making it less of a 4-letter word and, bringing it back to the 3-letter acronym that it should be, right? So I think making the right selection, right? Do your due diligence, make sure that you understand what each tech partner, what their role is in, what you're trying to achieve, and really look at someone like Orderful, right? There's a lot of traditional EDI companies out there that do things a certain way, right? And maybe they're not ever going to change. And I think to be able to look at someone that's taking a different approach to maybe an old story, right? And doing it a better way. It sounds corny, but it really is worth looking at, right? And I think that is probably the key, is like, who is taking this classic old problem and looking at it through a new lens and making it much, much better, right? So that would be my advice for anyone looking.
And I would be so in trouble if I said there's anything wrong with that advice. No, I truly agree with you. And I think, that's what gets me really excited about what we're working on here at Orderful, because we're hearing those complaints of what legacy providers have left on this industry. And, to comment on what Dave just said, right before I took this role, about 1 week before, I did a really great event, and EDI came up, and someone literally raised their hand, asked a question. They just said, why does EDI suck so much? And the audience is awfully small, it's about 30 people, but everyone groaned at the same time.
Yeah,
And it made me laugh. And But internally, it made me excited because I knew I was starting an opportunity at somewhere that was going to work on fixing that and making it so that EDI wasn't known as this true headache of something to overcome, but instead maybe looked at as more, how could actually a good EDI setup make me competitively give me a competitive advantage compared to some of my uh other companies out there. And so that I've heard the complaints, Dave. I've seen it outside this company, and I've heard it from customers before. It's there, and I can't wait for us to get to a point in the EDI space where we can say this isn't the headache that its legacy has become. Robert, anything you want to add to wrap the episode too for that?
No, I mean, I think you both hit the nail on the head. Um, for me, it's always about putting in a little bit of extra legwork and planning that, an ounce of planning is going to be worth, a pound of cure later on. And that's where, we typically, before somebody gets an iPass.com account, we've got a partner network that's got the better part of 100 agencies, SIs, VARs, MSPs, what have you, experts in integration and different ecosystems, and being able to sit with somebody and talk about what are your integration goals and what are the software systems that you're using, that you're planning to replace, that you're planning to add, and thinking about that as, something that's going to be not just a one-off, but, something that you're going to be doing over time. I think, that's where you start to do a great job of prioritizing and timelining and building the right expectations internally and externally, and you set yourself up for success. The same as I think pretty much everything else in business, just about being able to put the right dominoes in the right order to get a really exciting outcome at the end.
Love that. Well, Dave, before we jump into some announcements and of course dive into where you can meet both iPass.com and Orderful at events near you, if people are listening today, what's the best place for them to go to learn more about the work iPass.com is doing?
Yeah, definitely. iPass.com is certainly, if you head there, you're going to find a lot of information. They can always email me at dave.malda@ipass.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so DMs are always open, and I'm happy to, connect and have conversations. And then I think on, just upcoming for us, it's Shoptoberfest in September. It's Sweet World in Vegas. We're heading to that. We've got Ecom Forum, which is a Irish Titan event coming up in October. And then we're heading to the Microsoft Community Summit in October. And we have Meet Magento Toronto as well. So those are just a few of the, upcoming things that we'll be at. So Robert and I are trying to be everywhere.
And we will be there with you as well at some of those events too. So we'll make sure here this
Looking forward.
Yeah, we'll have, of course, some of those links in this next segment so you guys can join us there. But until then, Robert, Dave, thank you so much for being partners here with us here at Orderful and continuing the good EDI work that needs to be done.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that great conversation with our partners over at iPass.com. And iPass.com and Orderful are actually both hitting the road. We're going to be at Sweet World in Las Vegas from October 6th through the 9th. I'm very excited to be at this one. You can find Orderful at booth 121. We'll be right next to the Sweet Cafe. If you're looking to schedule some time with our team, you can reach out to Paul Vasello at the email below. And of course, we'll also be at Dynamics Community Summit in Orlando from October 19th to the 23rd. I'll be there with my good coworker, Jenna Buckley. You can check her email out here, and you can schedule an on-site with her as well, so we can meet you and have some great times talking about how we can improve your EDI as well. Now, of course, to wrap up this wonderful second episode, it's time for us, that's right, to get to the integration point. Now, wonderful episode, of course, with Robert and Dave. And I think if there's one thing that we can take away from this, it's that disconnected systems don't just slow you down. They drain your resources, create huge costly mistakes and hold back your business in general. And we just can't have that in this era of 2025, right? So, of course, when you are looking to centralize your visibility and standardize how your data works, you need to look at your EDI and your integrations so that you can unlock speed, accuracy, and create a real competitive advantage out there. At Orderful, we believe integration shouldn't be a barrier to growth. It should be the foundation for that growth. So again, thank you for joining us. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn so you get updates of when these next episodes come out. And I hope you enjoyed this integration point.
Still relying on legacy EDI? Manual work, costly van providers, and slow onboarding are holding you back. Orderful changes everything. Onboard trading partners 10 times faster, automate every transaction, solve production issues in seconds, and stay compliant across all your trading partners. Connect once, trade with the world. Go live in under 9 days with pre-built connections and real-time validation. With built-in support for leading ERPs and systems of record, Orderful fits seamlessly into your existing tech stack. Orderful is #1 in time to value for EDI. Orderful supports all core EDI documents across your supply chain, from order to cash, procure to pay, and logistics to warehousing, and with no hidden fees, ever. Whether you're upgrading your ERP, clearing a trading partner backlog, or done with the cost and complexity of legacy EDI, Orderful helps you move faster with zero surprises and complete control. The EDI infrastructure of the future, available today. Built for change, ready for growth.